Welcome to the And She Looked Up Creative Hour podcast with Lisa Bolton and Melissa Hartfield. We're two women who are artists and entrepreneurs, and yes, those two things can go together. This podcast is for the artists, the creators, and the makers who want to find a way to make a living creating what they love.
Welcome to this week's episode of the And She Looked Up Creative Hour. I'm Lisa, and I'm here with my co-host Melissa.
Hello, everyone.
So today's episode is the final installment in our month-long discussion around inspiration. Melissa and I started the month off by sharing our top 10 sources of inspiration, both offline and online. And then we talked about how once you have some favorite sources of inspiration, how do you cultivate that inspiration on a regular basis? And then we talked about what it means to steal like an artist. So how we were both inspired by the book of the same name, Austin Kleon, and just kind of how it relates to inspiration, imitation, and even downright plagiarism and the differences around those themes. And so to wrap up our whole month on inspiration, we felt it was pertinent to close with the topic of inspiring others. So right now we are at the end of March, and it'll no doubt be remembered as the year of the pandemic. But, you know, as we're all practicing safe physical distancing, I think we're both seeing artists and creatives and makers just stepping up and inspiring their communities in ways that I don't think we would have even considered a couple months ago. It's been incredible to see how when we're actually cut off from one another, how much artists and creatives have actually stepped up and inspired not only their own immediate communities, but they're actually reaching communities and inspiring people that I don't think they would have ever interacted with. So that's what we're going to talk about today, just really the importance around that and some of the things that you can do to service and inspire your own community.
What we've been seeing the last few weeks has been so cool. I love it. It makes me so happy because I think this is what being creative and being an artist is all about. It is communicating with and impacting people with what you create and making a difference in their lives. And I think sometimes we tend to think that what we do maybe doesn't contribute in the same way that being a police officer or a lawyer or a teacher or a healthcare worker or, you know, anyone with a quote unquote real job. And the reality is that's not true. What we contribute is equally important. And we have so many opportunities to use our gifts and our skills to influence the people around us and the world around us for good. You can make a lot of statements through what you create, be they political or non-political. And there's just a lot of opportunity to inspire other people to do better or be better or come together. And that's one of the things that I've just loved seeing the last few weeks. And the flip side of that is it doesn't always have to be completely altruistic. One of the things we'll talk a little bit about as we go through this episode is that this can actually help you from a business standpoint. And one of the cool things that I saw very early on was the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra decided to broadcast the last episode in their the last concert in their Beethoven series that they were doing. This was before groups of 50 or more were banned, and an orchestra has at least 50 people in it, so they can't do this anymore. But before that, they decided to do the last concert in their concert hall with no audience, and they broadcast it on Facebook Live. 26,000 people. They normally perform at the Orpheum, and I don't know how many seats the Orpheum has, but I'm going to guess it's maybe around 1,200. I just thought when I heard that number, they reach so many more people than they would normally have the opportunity to reach. And people who are obviously looking for something to listen to or take their mind off of things. And I just thought to myself, first of all, I sent them money. I sent them $20 and I wrote on my little donation thing, I'm sending this as a thank you for that great concert. I was one of the people who watched it. And I said, I can't always get into the city and I can't always afford a ticket to come see a live performance. But, if you offered up a remote season ticket where I could watch live at a reduced price, like I'd be there. I'd be all over it. And, a lot of arts organizations like symphonies and theater companies and stuff, they're always struggling for money and revenue streams. And I'm kind of hoping that some of them have seen what technology can do in the last little while and how it can connect people and recognize that, we have an opportunity. Like, people are hungry for what we're putting out. They just don't always have the opportunity to pay for parking, pay for a night out, pay for a sitter, all these things, plus ticket, plus the travel time to get into the city or whatever. And here's an opportunity for us to reach them and make it affordable, generate new revenue for us. So they were doing something really good and generous and hoping to bring some kind of joy to people. And at the same time, I hope they recognize that there's an opportunity for them there as an organization, because I want our arts organizations to succeed. I want them to be financially stable so that they're always there. And I don't begrudge them finding other ways to make that happen.
Well, no, really, musicians, I think, are some of the most purest artists in the sense of doing it for the love of the craft. It's not something, I think there's such a small percentage that are fortunate to make a living from being a professional musician at any level. And so, that the people in that symphony, their priority one is likely just to be able to play the music with their colleagues and create the piece. Second priority, being able to have that heard. You're right, although altruistic in its intent, I think it's a brilliant business opportunity for people that maybe should be considering some alternate distribution methods for their product that maybe they didn't think of before. And I certainly wouldn't have thought of, for me, I'm not someone who would normally consume, this VSO performances. I think you're right. You hit on a few things, just getting there, negotiating that. There's also sometimes there can be an intimidation factor when you're just starting to connect with a new creative outlet. So whether I wanted to go to a book reading or an art gallery or a music performance, if I'm really new to it, I know for myself, I might have some just personal confidence hesitation. Am I going to the right place? Am I going to stand out? Will people know it's my first time? And I think being able to consume something from the comforts of your home without even having to negotiate all those logistics and have to figure out everything else is a great opening to it. I think it takes away some of the intimidation factor. And yeah, I would be more inclined to go maybe partake in something that I wouldn't if I had to actually go and do it in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Things like, I don't want to call them the higher arts, but there are certain artistic outlets that I think have a little bit of, that are considered kind of highbrow, like classical music, like the opera, like Shakespeare, things like that, when really they were just the popular music of their day or the popular movies/plays of their day, giving people an opportunity to experience that in a much more low-key way is just increasing your audience base, and it's just smart. And I think one of the things that I am really very passionate about in anything I do is that the underlying piece of it for me is that I want to serve people. When you do that, sort of, you do have a bit of a hesitation around earning when you're serving. And I think this is something that most creatives struggle with. There's something very important to kind of recognize there, that if you are serving people and giving them what they want and what they need, it is perfectly okay to earn money from that. You are giving them something of value and they are giving you something of value in return. It is an equal exchange. And I think that's something that as creatives we often feel very uncomfortable with. That's one of the things I kind of wanted to talk about at some point during the episode, is just, as long as you are serving, you can inspire and serve at the same time and still earn at the same time.
Unapologetically too. I don't think you have to be meek about it. I think you can be transparent and upfront about it, and people understand. That took me a long time to get to a place where I felt comfortable charging for a lot of my work. It wasn't until time and time again that you start that you just put yourself out there and you do it, you realize that people do value, much like I myself value and am willing to pay for certain things. And I appreciate the work that's gone into them. It's not about a price point more, it is about a value. And that can only be determined by the recipient. It's completely subjective. As long as from a business perspective, you're comfortable with what you're charging, I think you can do it unapologetically and really find a way to get comfortable with that. You have a right to earn a living doing your art. I think that we don't have to be afraid of that.
When we first thought about this episode, it was, we were thinking more along the lines of like, we as creatives are always looking for inspiration. It's very important for us. It fills our well. But what we sometimes forget is that we in turn often inspire other people. And that sometimes it's nice to kind of intentionally try to inspire people. When we first came up with the topic idea, we were thinking more along the lines of things like giving back to your community, volunteering, teaching, and we're going to talk about all of that. But as we started to kind of branch out into it more, we realized that, it doesn't have to just be like a free for all, take all my time, take all my inspiration kind of thing. It can also be something that you do exchange value with, and giving back without being paid you can get value from that as well. So I don't want you to think that value necessarily means dollars. Mm-hmm. Value just means that you are getting something back in return for what you are giving that makes you feel like it was worth it. That can be many different things.
I think there's a distinction between donating your time, your craft, and inspiring and giving back to your community. Like I think of the term, like if I'm just donating, I might make something and give it to somebody.
Yeah, like a painting for a silent auction or something like that. Yes, that's totally different. But I'm speaking more along the lines of like your time, mm-hmm. When you're giving of your time, because that is our one finite resource. We can't buy more of it, and you can in some ways buy more of it, but when your time's up, your time's up.
Yeah.
But yes, there's so many different ways that you can give back and in turn inspire others. I guess what I was just trying to say in a very roundabout, awkward way is that, when you do that, you want to do it so that you're getting something of value back. And the thing of value does not have to be money. It could be many things.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value as an artist in being a connector in the community. So sometimes I think we get caught up in like how I will take my art and I will put it onto someone else, or I will, whether that's my skills or my passion or my process or whatever I'm sharing with the community. I don't want to lose sight of that there is value in being a connector. By that, I mean taking somebody else's art and giving it to somebody else. So if I know of an artist or someone I support, I can kind of do it in an exponential way by supporting that artist and then transferring their art and introducing it to a new individual. I think that's a really neat way you can give back into the community that doesn't necessarily cost you time either. It's just sort of a way of contributing. When I've purchased, I mean, even with your art, I purchased a Miss Doodle and now it hangs in my school library and I'm able to introduce, somebody who I know appreciates that to your art. I've done it with other small businesses, especially at the craft fair time of year where you're sort of really introduced to some really neat new project. I love being able to support that and introduce that person to, and use those as gifts. So I think being a connector as an artist in your community can be a really simple way if you're just sort of looking for a quick way an easy way to inspire others as well.
Yeah, and we talked about two of those in our creative inspiration episode where we talked about the things that inspire us. The Jealous Curator and Holly Becker at Decorate, I don't want to say made their whole careers because their careers are very multifaceted, but they have tremendous impact on the creative world by curating different artists and different makers and sharing their work with people. It has provided them with content for their sites and for books and so many other things. And yet at the same time, they have had a tremendous impact on the careers of other artists and on inspiring people just by showing them what's out there and what you can do. There's tremendous value in that. That's why those two websites are so popular.
Mm-hmm. What kind of ways do you think, like if someone's just looking to give, be of service to the community and to look at giving back in forms of their creative, like what would be a way for people to maybe start with that you would recommend?
I think there's lots of different ways. I think one of the easiest ones to do is to teach what you know. And there's so many ways you can do this in today's day and age, as we are seeing online right now. Yes, there's opportunities to teach in so many different ways. You can teach a course that you can charge money for. You can teach online. You can teach at your local community rec center. You can team up with children's organizations and run workshops for kids where maybe you don't get paid or maybe you do, but it's just a way to give back by spending an afternoon showing kids how to finger paint or how to doodle tree, or all kinds of things like that. It could be, I don't know if Home Depot still does this, but they used to have a workshop on weekends at their stores where you could learn how to make a birdhouse, or you could, learn how to make a planter for your mom for Mother's Day. Like, there's always organizations out there who would welcome you with open arms if you went up to them and said, like, I've been thinking about, I'd love to do something with kids or adults, like an intro to watercolor class for seniors, or seniors community centers. They're always looking for things like that to keep people occupied and learning new things and giving them an excuse to socialize. There's a lot of socialization that can happen when you're making art. And that's another great way to connect people. So I think there's so many different opportunities with teaching, and it can be as small or as big as you like. It can be free. You can do it as a volunteer activity. You can charge for it. The only limit on it is your imagination.
And I think there's a distinction between sharing your skills and sharing your process, because I think there's actually value in both. And when you're sitting down to think about how you might start to teach, it would be interesting to break that up and see if you can leverage a little bit more out of that body of work that you want to teach. So there's going to be people that just want to learn sort of your hard set of skills. So whatever it is you do really well, there's just some technical skills involved in almost anything that is created. There's sort of that avenue you can go down. There's also people that are really going to want to learn your process. So they may have a basic level of technical skills, but what they're really curious about is like, what is a little bit more of the intangible stuff? What is your process when you're starting out with nothing and then you've created the widget and all the pieces in between? And I think those can be really different audiences, both really thirsty for that stuff. Like, I know for me, when I've first starting out, those technical skills, super important, and I really wanted those. But as I progressed in different fields, I loved seeing the behind the scenes. I loved watching someone come up with things, watching it unfold before my eyes. Like, that is a priceless. And I know as someone it would not only inspire me, I'd be willing to pay for it. I would feel a lot of value in someone showing me a little bit behind the curtain. And so if you're thinking about going out and teaching, before you sort of lump it all maybe into one thing, think about how you can slice and dice that into different portions that might be able to reach different people in your community.
Take the birdhouse example. You could have the Birdhouse Workshop where everybody comes and they learn how to make a birdhouse, but you've already pre-cut the wood, measured it. You've got the paints out for them. You've got the nails, and you're just showing them how to put it all together. So they go home with a finished birdhouse, and it's great. And everybody's happy. They're super excited. Oh, I've got a birdhouse. But the follow-up to that would be, here's how I created a pattern to make this birdhouse. Like, here's the process that goes from having a birdhouse in my head to actually designing what it's going to look like, to measuring and doing the drawings to cut out the wood, and then, figuring out what I want it to decorate. Like, you're going through the whole process with them. And there's people out there, once they've made that first birdhouse, they're going to be like, yeah, I'd like to make another birdhouse, but I don't want it to look like this one. But I don't know how to do that,
Yeah.
So we've watched Betty from Stems and Forks. She has this wonderful blog where she combines her passions of food photography and floral design to create these absolutely stunning images that have a very definite look and feel and style to them. You can take a class with her where you learn how to take a photograph, but you can also take a class with her where you learn how to create that spectacular look that she has. And she teaches you how to recreate that, how to edit your photos to kind of get that look and feel. Very different classes. So I think that's a really good distinction to make there, that there's very different ways that you can teach.
I found that a little bit teaching the board classes is that at the beginning, people just wanted to know how to put a board together. And I felt technically I could do that. But as I had some repeat people and some more detailed courses being requested, and they really wanted to know the process. And I myself struggled with being able to articulate like that. The process of trying to explain my process was very hard. And I thought, I don't know my process. And so it really forced me. So in a self-serving way, it was a great exercise to walk through, what is my process? What do I see? How do I come up with the ideas, the color palette, the layout, the board itself, the size? And I found it's very helpful for me to actually document that process. So if you get to a point where you are able to share that, I think it's not only valuable to others, but I think you yourself will actually find it a really good exercise. And even to do that, whether you intend to serve your community with it or not, I think it would be just a good exercise for people to go through.
Yeah, it's very much along the lines of the reverse engineering that we've talked about in previous episodes, where you're not reverse engineering somebody else's work, you're reverse engineering your own work. So what are some other ways that you have on your list?
Well, I mean, it seems very basic, but just sharing your art, getting your art out there. I guess kind of how we opened up the episode with the orchestra example, where they had a standard way in which they got their art to people. By no choice of their own, that channel was blocked, and so they had to go find another channel. I would say another way to serve your community is not to wait until your current method.
Until there's a pandemic?
Let's hope we don't have to wait another, for the next one in the next decade. I think of a lot of Etsy sellers. And so, Etsy is great and it is a beautiful way to sell your homemade goods, but Etsy isn't the only way. And I think being able to share your art, starting to think about sharing your art through multiple channels and getting it out to different audience that aren't the most obvious ones. And I think about someone even like my mother, who in her mid-60s isn't someone who is super comfortable, I would say, shopping online. And I think would like to browse Etsy, but she's the person who wants to go to the market and touch and hold and feel things. And so I think sometimes we can get down one path and we've got this audience that's very comfortable there. But if you can think about branching out, you're going to reach other people that maybe don't spend their time on Etsy, and it could open up a whole new market, not only for yourself, but it could draw in other contributors to your community. Because I think if I've got more people appreciating and enjoying and consuming my craft, that's going to create more interest on the back end. So they're going to be talking to people about it. They're going to be interested on it. It might inspire them not just to create maybe a watered down version of what I'm doing, but maybe their own spin on something, which only bolsters the community as a whole. So how can I get different sets of eyeballs? Right now, I think in this pandemic environment that we're in, my son has been able to access a lot of things that he just wouldn't normally have access. I wouldn't have thought to bring him into it, but I'm in there listening to an artist, playing from their living room, or some of these, like the orchestra, or some of the people that are teaching classes online, and I'm sitting here and he happens to be home from school. So he's here with me consuming these things. It's a whole new set of eyes. He asks great questions I never would have thought of. And I think that never would have happened if these people had said, oh, well, my store is closed and therefore I shall remain closed until my traditional method of selling or displaying my work comes back to me. And by exploring these alternate channels, you're piquing the interest and getting people talking and excited about stuff they never would have been exposed to. So share your work, even if it's not perfect, even if you don't love it, share it. People want to see it.
Yeah. And watching what's been going on the last few weeks, especially like in the food blogging world where I spend most of my daytime, is seeing so many bloggers who have really just taken to this and who are, I've seen people who would never in a million years have touched video because they just have a fear of being on camera, who are suddenly doing Facebook Lives in their kitchens. Like, here's how we're going to cook a really great dinner you're going to get 3 meals out of, and here's what you need. And they're giving shopping lists before they go live, like a day or two, so people can kind of figure out if they have the ingredients. And they're adapting their content to be more pantry staple friendly, and they're doing Instagram lives and Instagram stories and all these different ways to kind of, because they want to help, is essentially what it comes down to. Like I think people feel a little bit helpless and nobody wants to sit at home. They're looking for ways to get out there and help people. And helping is a great way to inspire. You think you're helping, but to somebody who's being helped, they are looking up to you. They're going, thank goodness this person was here, because now I have a really delicious dinner on the table for my family, and I didn't even have to leave my house to do it. And somebody was there helping me, and they were answering my questions, and it's a real person working in a real kitchen like I have in my house. And it's been really cool to see how many people have just found ways to share what they're doing. I think so many musicians have started teaching little mini online classes, how to do basic chords on a guitar and things like that. And Patrick Stewart is reading a Shakespearean sonnet a day to his Facebook audience.
Yeah, I think it really reinforces the belief that people want to connect and they want to see vulnerability. They don't want to see the perfectly styled everything. And, we've talked about it before, and the impact of social media and everything being perfect and polished before it gets out there. But now in this time, it's kind of forcing people to say exactly what you just said. The concert is from my living room. The cooking show is from my tiny kitchen. And there's a realness to it. And I think when you combine that, the themes that keep coming forward are, I want to connect with people and I'm willing to be vulnerable to do it. And I think that's a real success for better creativity, better content, better quality work comes out of that when we're not all hung up and worried about it being perfect or fitting a certain mold. There's a lot more realness that's coming out, and I think people are drawn to it.
Yeah, the Barenaked Ladies did something a couple of days ago from their various homes, and they didn't have all their stuff. So their drummer was not playing on a drum kit. He was playing what looked like a bar from the 1970s in his basement, And the keyboard guy was same thing. He looked like he was in a dark room in his basement with nothing on the walls and his keyboard. And you just like they were just 4 guys jamming in their basements. And you just realize they didn't have all their fancy gear, their fancy instruments. They were just, and they were still making music and they still sounded great. And they didn't need all the bells and whistles.
Well, that leads into something I had written down too that I wanted to pick up, which was art as a form of therapy. Because I think art therapy as a whole is a whole thing and could be a whole episode, and all the different ways that art therapy can really help people. But in times like this right now, being able to teach somebody something, I think gives both the teacher and the student a sense of control. Even although right now things are out of control, we know we're going to get through this. There are times in life where you feel frantic and hectic and can feel out of control. This is a worldwide problem right now, but sometimes your community, your town is going through something where the people around you, there's a feeling of anxiety or worry. And I'm really noticing that I think it's feeding both sides of the equation. I think the teachers out there that are teaching their art and their craft and what they love, it gives them a sense of order and control. There's something they're confident in. There's an order method to their madness. They can get it out in a very organized way, in a way that they know how. It's how they express themselves. And then the consumers of it, the recipients or the students, it gives them some form of control, some purpose, some, calm to chaos. It also gives them progress. So, we've been at this for a couple of weeks in this sort of state of distancing. Things that if you started doing them a couple of weeks ago, you're starting to reap the rewards of that. And that can be quite therapeutic in and of itself. So just inspiring others and giving back in a form of service without any sort of professional designations around this, it's a form of art therapy that is going to really contribute to positive mental health in people. And I believe that. Like, I know for me, that's a new space that I'm exploring, and I love what it's doing for myself, and I can see how it can have an effect on others.
Yeah, I think something that we don't see very much of anymore, but that used to be so popular, and I don't know why it's gone away, is just that, you used to have all these small towns would have community theaters, or they would put on benefit concerts, or variety shows or talent shows, where everybody would just come out and do something silly that, like the concert in Downton Abbey where they're raising funds for the hospital during World War One, and all my Anne of Green Gables books where they were constantly having concerts at the hall and in the church and things like that. And we just, even when I was a kid, like, there was so many different community theater, there were so many different art things my mom could put me in. And I don't have kids, so maybe I'm just very disconnected, but I don't feel like those things happen much today. I don't hear about them as much. I hear about all my friends' kids who are in organized sports, but I hear very little about any kind of organized arts outside of dance. I feel like dance is a bit of a sport, though. So yeah, I don't feel like I hear about that. Maybe I'm just the people I hang out with, but I feel like the focus is very much on sports for youth. And that was one of the things I had on my list, was that, when you're looking at potentially giving back your time or looking for ways to inspire others or contribute to your community, don't dismiss the idea of working with other age groups besides yours. I think there's tremendous opportunities to give back by working with kids. And I think there's tremendous opportunities to give back by working with seniors. And I think there are tremendous things to gain from both of those because they're not your age group, in very different ways, depending on which one you're working with. That was something that I had on my list.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting observation. I would say there was a lot of arts and crafts in the early years, up until about school age. And
preschool.
Yeah, totally.
Preschool.
And I'm talking and way more than I even attended. Like, there are we have an organization here called Four Cats, it's for-profit business that offers incredible both child and adult programs, but I can only speak to the children's programs, and they were fantastic. This is a group that said they got in front of their school calendars. They knew every pro D day, every long weekend. They had programming, half day, full day camps, all art based, every medium, and not just splatter paint. I mean, really beautiful. I'm literally looking at 2 canvases that my son did, when he was 4 and 5, that yes, they give them a high amount of guidance, but they're still juvenile and childlike, and I can still see his influence in them, and they're beautiful, and the pottery that they do, and they're just an amazing. And then it's like it hits, then it all stops. And it's a really interesting observation because I don't know why or when or how it all stopped, but you're right, sports definitely dominates. As a parent, I just felt like, well, he's getting that at school, because I can tell you, every day, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, they are coming home with art projects that, you got to hide 3 levels deep in the recycling bin so they don't see them because you just can't keep it all. So I don't know if there's this feeling that school takes over in the early years, maybe the K1, 2. Then about grade 3, that sort of just stops, and art is replaced with French or science or other, STEM comes in at around that age, and it's like I think art gets pushed down unless you're at a special choice school or where that's a more dominant part of the curriculum, and you never really never really thought to keep it going. And now, funny, just coming off of spending time at the cabin, it's hard to get my son into art projects. I don't know if he doesn't have the patience, and the pace isn't fast enough. It really has to be the right project. And I'm remiss about that because I think we really enjoyed those times. And so I think there is a void there. And I think there's a lot of kids that are not into the sports and are looking for creative outlets. and they're not, I don't know that they're all there. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Even having a 9-year-old, I would say it's harder to find some of those things at a level that still holds their interest and is challenging. And yet I think there's kids out there that are craving it, and you've got parents, with means looking to invest in their children in that space. So if we even take the giving back or the altruistic side out of this, I think there is even a business opportunity there, certainly in our community, to serve those groups of young adults.
Yeah, because even what you were just talking about there, what I was hearing is like, yes, there was programming, but it was on their days off from school. Like, it wasn't like when you play soccer or you play baseball or you play hockey, you go to practices multiple times a week, you play a game once a week. Like, it is something you do after school consistently for a season. And if you're playing at a higher level, you're doing it for the entire year, and it's very organized. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing like that for art. Like, is there like a kids theater group where kids go once or twice a week and they learn, and they're learning basic acting skills, but they're also working towards putting on a play at the end of their season?
Well, you know what? I think you hit on something there. I think it's serious and it's with an objective. And I think there's the distinction. And I think that's where sports has a very clear path. There's a winner loser. There's a season. It's very structured and organized. And I think even the drama side, now we also live in a very, both of us being in suburb of Vancouver, there's a large sort of acting and movie component to this city. That said, the people that I know in it are like in it on a professional level. Like, this is about headshots and learning how to sing and learning how to act and project, and for the sake of almost for landing the part.
Yeah, I'm just talking about like amateur dramatics, or I know growing up, my parents' rule with us was that we had to play a musical instrument and we had to play a sport. So we both played sports. I hated it. My brother loved it. And we both played musical instruments. I loved it. My brother tolerated it. I had to practice my piano every day after school for half an hour and longer when I got more advanced. And, we had to go to soccer practice, and my brother played baseball as well. So like, we didn't have a ton of activities. Like, that was it. It was music and a sport. My mom always managed to find things for me as the one who was not sporty. And I think that's because my mom wasn't sporty either. And she kind of understood that this isn't like, it just didn't do anything for me. But this is one of the things I find so frustrating when every year, the Vancouver province, one of the local newspapers here, they do this huge thing on all the kids who are graduating, who are going off to universities all over North America on sports scholarships, like who our top athletes are and your future superstars and all this stuff. And not a peep about the kids who are doing really cool stuff in the arts or in the sciences. It is so sports focused. And it's like, there's this whole group of kids out there who are just, looking for something. And my neighborhood, the city that I live in, we have this skate park. If you've spent a lot of time going around cities in North America, you know that skate parks usually have some really incredible street art and graffiti in them. I'm not talking about like people being jerks and tagging stuff. I'm talking about people who've gone out and made like a real effort to create something really cool. Our skate park does not allow any of that. So you've got this big gray monolith, and there's nothing inspiring about it at all. And so the kids go down under the Alex Fraser Bridge. It's a big bridge here in the Lower Mainland, and they go down under there. I walk my dog down all the time, and they go down under there at night, and they do their murals and their street art and their graffiti on the big pylons of the bridge and the highway. And some of the work is incredible. And every other week, the city is down there painting over it frantically. And there's nothing vulgar about it, or, yes, I get it. It's not their property. But here's these kids who are like dying for an outlet. And the city constantly puts in their Facebook group, graffiti will not be tolerated. And finally, one day I just wrote a comment. I said, why don't you let these kids have at it at the skate park? That's where they want to put their art in the first place. The stuff that you guys are painting over is really good. Like there's nothing wrong with it. I get that it's in the wrong spot, but give them a spot to put it. Like encourage it instead of frantically trying to cover it up. That's all the kids want. They just want an outlet. If you give them the space and you show them that the work is respected, they in turn, for the most part, will respect the space.
Mm-hmm. Well, if they have some ownership over it, right? If they believe this is our space, and you tend to respect your own space more as a teenager.
There is quite a code amongst graffiti artists and street artists of like, you respect another person's work. You don't go and you don't mess with somebody else's work. You do your work over here or whatever. Like they don't try to destroy each other's work, and I feel like, if you're looking for a way to give back, that's something that you can do. You can connect with your local city or your local Parks and Rec board, and you can say like, look, this is who I am. I'm an artist. I create, and I would love to like put together a program with kids in this age group and do something really cool with them to help them channel this creative energy they have in a way that is appropriate for the city. You don't have to get paid, or maybe you will get paid. I don't know. But then you get to work with these kids who are just brimming with ideas and enthusiasm and are so excited to have an outlet. And that is very contagious. Mm-hmm. I think that's a way, like, you're giving them the opportunity and you're there to help guide them. But at the same time, that energy is going to flow back to you and it's going to influence your work. Mm-hmm. So you're inspiring, but at the same time, you're getting inspiration back. And it's very much a two-way street. And that's something I feel like you don't get when you stick to your kind of little world or age group or peer group. You have to go out and you have to find it. And you can find the same thing working with seniors. You get to work with these people who have this wealth of experience and knowledge and stories to tell. And they're looking for places to tell those stories. They just want their stories to be heard. And there's so many things you could do with that. Like you could offer a creative writing class or an opportunity for seniors to write their memoir or pick one aspect of their life and turn it into a short story or a book. Or, my mom's always playing with different things, trying different things. She's going to crochet this week and she's going to take pictures the next week. She's always looking for little classes to take and stuff like that. She was a very busy professional raising two kids, and now she's retired and she has all this time on her hands and she wants to explore. And there's a great opportunity there for people to give these people with more time and with great stories to tell an opportunity to get those stories out through many different mediums: music, books, painting. I just think there's a opportunity there, and you get back what you're putting into it in a different way than you might expect.
I think the beauty of working with an older community, seniors in general, there comes a confidence and a little bit of a, I don't care.
Give a crap.
Yeah. And so I'm willing to try things. I think when you're younger and you're maybe less confident to step into these new mediums, I think the beauty of working with seniors is they're kind of ready to say, bring it on. I'm aware that life is a timeline. It's strictly math, and I've only got X number of years left on this earth, and I'm willing to learn, and I'm willing to be vulnerable. I'm willing to give it a try. And they can be some of the most enthusiastic, engaging students you will have if you give back. And so I agree with you, reaching out through the Parks and Rec or any of these, they're constantly looking for seniors programming. And it's such a low risk side. Like we did a whole episode on taking risks. This is a very low risk. These programs quite often run 6-8 weeks max. They're short. It's so worth trying it. If you don't like it and it doesn't fire you up, cross it off the list and move on to another way to give back. Or you may find it's just what you've been looking for. And surprisingly enough, they might even teach you something or open you up to a new way to do your art. So I just think there's so many upsides to it that working with seniors, I agree with you. Seniors are a lot younger than we give them credit for. Like I think sometimes, we I don't know. Like
I think now we're in our 40s. We recognize
And I just think when I look at pictures, I mean, it's funny because after the Super Bowl, they put pictures of Blanche from Golden Girls next to Jennifer Lopez, because Blanche was apparently 50 during the show. And of course, Jennifer Lopez is 50 now, and sort of showed you like what 50 looked like then and now, and kind of saying how people have really, in a lot of ways through education on healthy living have found a bit of the fountain of youth. So I do think that 65-year-olds today are doing a lot more than 65-year-olds did 30 years ago. You've got a group that's got some time and disposable income and a willingness to learn and a bit of a bring it on attitude. I think that's a perfect combination for introducing someone to some new art.
Yeah, and you mentioned art therapy before too. There are a lot of seniors long-term care homes and places like that where you can work with people who have dementia and other issues like that, where there is a real need for like a type of art therapy, and how much that can help people who are struggling with those kind of issues and diseases. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of opportunities there. And we kind of talked about whether you get paid or not get paid, but I believe that like most school districts that have night school programs, mm-hmm. which is a lot of them, I believe that those are paid because they charge for the courses, right? So I'm assuming people get paid. My school district offers like actual continuing ed stuff, but they also offer a lot of personal development stuff. It could be anything from flower arranging to learning how to use your DSLR or learning how to send email. Mm-hmm. And also your local public library. They are often looking for children's programming, but also community programming. My local library does a Bitch and Stitch event every Friday, I think, where you bring your needles, knitting needles, crochet needles, embroidery, whatever, and they meet up and do their fabric arts and you're away. And there's opportunities for you to lead events like that in so many places that we just forget to look. If you go into any yarn or knitting store, in the back, there's always that group of women who are there with their needles and they're, helping each other out with their projects. And so we tend to think of it being something you do in a knitting store, but my local library does the exact same thing. Libraries usually have space dedicated that you can book ahead of time. And as long as you're doing something that serves the community, quite often there may be little to no rent involved for the space, as long as you're doing something to give back and help grow the community. So there's lots of options and ways that you can get back out into your community and bring people together through whatever it is you create.
Mm-hmm. And it can even just be a small group of people that have different ways in which they are creative. Like I love the idea. There's a couple things on my list. I'd love to get better at lettering, and I'd love to mm-hmm. learn how to knit or crochet. I would love to almost do a bit of a skill exchange with other creatives. So it'd be really interesting to me to get a small group of like 4, 5, 6 women together who all have a really unique talent through a different medium or a different outlet, and share with one another and be able to walk away. Can you imagine just an afternoon or a day together where you kind of pick up just intro to certain skills that you didn't have and walk away having that exposure to 4 or 5 different new crafts or outlets, and then coming home and saying which one really resonated with me. It just might be what you need to like kick off to explore it more. But I just think it would be really fun and, I don't know, really inspiring to sit with 4 other creatives and teach each other. And I know that would really boost me. I think that would lift me up energetically. I don't know. I think that would be a fun way to do it. And it's very informal, safe way, right?
Okay. One of the other things I had on my list was mentoring. And this is one I don't think we've touched on really at all, but this is another way that you can give back and really help inspire. And it's done on a very one-to-one basis, but that is finding somebody else who's really interested in what you do and giving them your time and your expertise and access to your expertise in a one-on-one way. So and usually you would do this with somebody who's younger than you, who's just starting out, who's, it could be somebody who's in grade 12 who's looking to pursue fine arts at university or something like that. Or it could be somebody, who's fresh out of university and they want to start their own small creative business, and you're able to kind of take them under your wing and just help them find their way. It's not teaching in the sense that you're sitting down and you're teaching them how to do something. It's more like just being a guide in the background, to answer questions when they have questions, or to kind of maybe show them the different directions they can go in. It's very similar to like when you take your kids to work day, or, your kid comes to you and says, I really want a doctor. So you ask your family doctor if they can shadow for a day. Only this is a longer commitment. This is sort of helping them through the first few years and maybe even longer. And those kind of relationships can be also very beneficial, mutually beneficial, because you are taking the time to work with somebody who's younger, who may be more aware of new methods, new technologies, new techniques that you've heard about, but maybe you haven't explored yet, new ways of marketing yourself. People who are younger tend to be very savvy when it comes to how to get the word out about things and how to get your stuff out there. And I think sometimes we tend to, the older we get, the less we tend to kind of want to do that. Just speaking from personal experience, but they can breathe some fresh air into your own creative world.
Yeah, there's so much value also in having a safe place to test things out with, and a person, like if you're just starting out, to know that you've got that person that you can run the beta version by, that you can say, I've got this crazy idea, what do you think? And they'll be honest with you and they'll give you real feedback. I think there's a security to that when you're starting down a new path, or you're looking at taking your current, path to a new level, having that, but there's so much value in that, and having that person in your life.
Yeah. And it was one of the things that was behind the name of And She Looked Up for me. It was just that I just remember when I was younger, and even to a certain extent today, just really struggling to find those women who were 10 steps ahead of me. I just wasn't seeing those people. I wasn't hearing their stories, and just knowing that there were other women who had done it, who had managed to start a business and then managed to have a family while they were running that business, and managed to navigate all these different things that I hadn't got to yet, and they were still going strong. And I just, that's where And She came up from. You look up, there's another woman further up the ladder from you who's holding her hand back to kind of give you that boost up to the next rung. And I felt when I was younger that was really missing for me in a lot of the different careers that I've had. So I just wanted to create a space where other women could find that. And I think that that's something that you can easily do in a individual capacity with somebody else who's taking that first step into running a creative business.
Exactly. No, that's a really good point. It can make a huge difference in somebody's trajectory on their, on their own path by reaching back or reaching up and lending a hand. I totally agree.
Just giving back to what you got out of the community, make sure to take a moment and give that back to somebody else who's just coming up, because I do think creative communities tend to be very close knit. We've all benefited from somebody who has given us that boost, and it's nice to be able to pay that forward to somebody coming up.
Well, we're coming up on about an hour. Is there anything else on your list that you had?
Not really. I think the one thing I had to kind of sum this up was that this is something that you do have to be intentional about and carve out some intentional time for this. And I think that's really important. I think it should be as much a part of your business model and your creative practice as, doing your banking or getting your creative inspiration or,
that's so
creating
true.
A new product.
Yeah, no, you know what? I think that would be such like the one thing if people took away, let alone sort of the ideas, but if the one thing people took away from this episode was a commitment to, over the next quarter, carve out intentional time to be of service to your creative community. I think if you can just do that, and I think That is a key part. I think we talk about it and then it can get pushed down because it's not revenue generating. It's not something I'm comfortable with. It's not something I've done before. It's easy to push that down. And I think if you can be intentional and schedule that in, you're absolutely right. That's how it's going to get done. It won't get done otherwise. There's just too many other balls in the air. You have to make it a dedicated ball.
Yes, you do. I really believe that. We did talk a little bit about, getting paid for what you're doing and not getting paid for what you're doing. And I want to just remind people that if you have a blog or a website where you're sharing content that's free, free resources, and I know so many artists and creatives and food bloggers basically put all their content out there for free. And I've seen so many other artists who've offer up tutorials and tips and free downloadable worksheets and templates and all kinds of things. That is another way to serve the community that you have around you. That is free. If you're offering all of that for free, don't feel badly about charging for other things, whether it's more dedicated access to you, whether it's something of higher value, because you're putting out that basic level for free. And there's a lot to be said for that, whether it's through emails or blog posts or things like that. So as long as you're giving that to people, you should not feel any anxiety over charging for something that has more value.
No, absolutely. That's a really, really good point. I think we both have things in our career creatively that we give away for free and things that we charge for. And I've gotten to a place where you're very, very comfortable with that. And I think if anyone has questions around that, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know sort of how you either the questions that you're struggling with as it relates to that, or how you're handling it. If you found a way that works for you, I think we're really open to how others are navigating that space, which can be a bit tricky. And so we'd really love to hear your stories and, hear how you're managing through it all.
Yeah, that's one of the things we would really like to do in the coming weeks is to do an episode on charging and pricing, because it's just such a minefield for everyone. And we have some very strong opinions on it that don't always mesh with what everybody else has to say about it. So I think that would be a good one to talk about in the coming weeks.
Great. Well, that was a fun hour. And I think that was a fun month. I think it was really nice coming off of our, we're only into really the second month of our podcast, and it's been really fun sort of finding our rhythm. But I love that, we started with courage, which I felt like we were both courageous in launching something that we had no experience in, just a lot of things we wanted to say. And we found this great outlet for it. And now having wrapped up, these last, several hours of discussion with you about inspiration, I know I'm feeling inspired and I'm feeling ready to take on something new.
So we will be back next month with a new theme.
Awesome.
All right, everyone. We're so glad you could join us this week.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great week. Thank you so much for joining us for the And She Looked Up Creative Hour. Be sure to check out the show notes for any links or resources we talked about in this episode. If you enjoyed the chat, please be sure to subscribe and you will automatically be notified when the new shows are released. And we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a review, tell us where you're listening from, or even just send a note to say hi. You can find us at andshelookedup.com or on Instagram under andshelookedup. Thanks so much for listening.